We all have to provide the DMV with information to get our driver's license and car registration. But now a shocking new report says the DMV has been selling that data for profit. The DMV says commercial companies like insurance companies and credit agencies pay for the information, but Vice found it's also sold to private investigators. A spokesman says the DMV takes its obligation to protect personal information seriously. Joining me now to talk about the report is the Executive Director of Consumer Watchdog, Carmen Balber. Carmen, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so selling names and addresses and car registration information. Initially, that appears to be outrageous, but as I look at the report, it doesn't seem that surprising. To what extent should people be outraged?
People should be incredibly outraged because, look, when you give your information to a government entity, you are not signing up for it to be sold for profit on the private market. Now, there are some exceptions. For example, we all know that our insurance company needs our driving record. So when we sign up for insurance, it's fine for our insurance company to go to the DMV and make sure we're not lying about the number of accidents we've had. But it is outrageous for any person to have their private information put in the hands of a private investigator. It's outrageous. People should be angry.
So how much of this is legal and why is the DMV doing it?
Unfortunately, more of it is legal than we think. Now, the DMV is doing it for a couple of reasons. One, because they make money off it. It helps them fund their operations. The DMV should, of course, be getting money from the state, not from selling our private information to private companies. But there are also certain rules that we know have been passed in California and elsewhere that have expanded the DMV's ability to sell our private information to third parties. And those are laws that the legislature needs to change.
So let's talk about some of the laws that are in effect. Does this go against the Driver's Privacy Protection Act in California, or do they find a way around that?
Well, as you mentioned, Californians just won new privacy protections with the California Consumer Privacy Act, and that will give us more ability to prevent the use and sale of our information online. However, government agencies are to a large part excluded from those provisions. So because the government isn't supposed to be using your money for commercial purposes, they're excluded from a lot of those new protections that take effect starting January 1st. So what we need is more action from the legislature to prohibit some of these uses, particularly with private investigators who should never have access to government information.
So what part of this is new? Is it new that the DMV is giving away the information, or is it new that they're actually giving it away for a profit?
What's new is that there is more and more data collection online. So this is always information that the DMV has collected about Californians and people across the country. This is always information that they have given out in small measure to private companies, for example, when background checks are done, or to insurance companies. The difference now is the huge proliferation of data that is available about people online. The difference now is the vast proliferation of data that is being bought and sold about consumers online. So we're getting kind of mission creep at the DMV, who used to provide this information legally to a few limited sources, and now we're being asked for it by many, many more data aggregators who are using it for purposes that shouldn't be allowed.
Interesting. So a lot of this information is required for people to get the services they need at the DMV. So is there anything that people can do to stop the DMV from sharing their personal information?
Unfortunately, in this instance, no. You have to give this information to the DMV in order to get your license, and you can't tell them, no, I won't provide a piece of required information. You can sometimes limit the amount of information you give the DMV. They ask extraneous questions, but the heart of it, the most important information, your address, etc., you can't not give it to the DMV. So we need lawmakers to crack down on the DMV's use of this information. And I will say that the DMV does not have to sell this information to private investigators. There's no law requiring them to sell that information. They have the power right now to stop that immediately, and they should.
But it's very lucrative for them, right? In terms of the profit. We were talking about $50 million in a year, so that's too tempting, huh?
Hard to pass up, but they should. This is a government agency. We have the right to trust the government with our information. They should not be selling it to people who are using it for ulterior motives.
All right, Carmen, thank you so much for your insight.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.